Hello, and welcome back to Wild Water ASMR. Today I'm doing a long-awaited Q&A video, and I actually put this one off about a week because of this really annoying pimple there, but I've just kind of accepted now that it's not going to go away, so I'm just going to accept it and roll with it. So, about a week ago, I asked for your questions on Twitter. And so far, I have had 27 replies, I think. Some of them are double ups, but they're all very good questions, and I will aim to get around to all of them. And if you just missed out, I'll make sure to answer your question in a reply to your tweet. So, let's begin. Night Blossom, who is a fellow Australian ASMR YouTuber, asks, how was your Christmas and New Year's? So this Christmas was actually fairly quiet compared to other years. Usually I have my grandmother and two of her sisters come down, and we have a nice lunch at our place, and then they go home, and Mum, Dad and I go to a Christmas party for Dad's side of the family. However, this year, Grandma's no longer with us, and it was still fairly fresh, and so we decided to have a very quiet Christmas lunch. But for dinner we went to my cousin's place. She's had the place for about 2 years now, and this year she hosted the Christmas for the first time, so that was really nice to see her place. It was the first time I'd visited there, and it was a very nice drive to get there. And at New Year's, I really didn't do anything special. I stayed at home with my partner, and on the countdown to midnight, we were watching on TV, and we had a little Baileys and hot chocolate to start the year right. There's this show called Rage on Australian TV, and on Rage they play a bunch of music videos. And so this was the first show on after the New Year's Eve countdown. And so I started the year off by listening to Hot Chocolate, Everyone's a Winner, and continued with a bunch of great 80s songs. So I really liked that start to the new year. I'm not a very outgoing person, so I kind of enjoyed just staying inside and having a quiet New Year's. Jared asks, is your return to YouTube long-term, or is this just a temporary comeback? And I'm pleased to say that the return to YouTube is long-term. I do hope, if I don't lose inspiration, to put out a video at least once a week or once a fortnight. But if I'm in a good mood, I should hopefully upload even more often. But we'll see how it goes. This person asks, and I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce that name. I should really educate myself on that. They say, hi Wildwater, do you sing? Can you please sing? And I cannot. You would think I could, but I really just can't. I've tried, and it's not terrible if I find the right style that works for me, but no. I'll be dead and gone. Wouldn't mind a hanging, laying in the grave so long. Oh boy, all around this world. Can't sing. Ricky Thompson, who is a long-term patron of mine, so thank you, Ricky. He asks, would you ever consider doing a room tour? I've always thought those are a great way to get to know people. Well, unfortunately, my room at the moment looks absolutely terrible. There are sheets on the ground, and everything's still messy from Christmas, so I won't be able to show you through the room, but I'll give you a brief description. So I've got this bookshelf, which is a bunch of cubes. It's from IKEA. And on top of this bookshelf, I've got a vintage red Porsche bicycle back from the days when they used to make bikes. And I've got that up there. sitting on top, and it's all like rusty and it's got a bit of a chipped frame, but it rides well because I enjoy fixing up vintage road bikes. That's been a hobby of mine for a few years now. And also my room is just filled with houseplants. I kid you not, every table, and even at one point on the handlebar of the bike, I've got a houseplant either sitting on the table or hanging from something. So I've got tons of them, and it's a bit of an addiction. They keep growing. I've also got a bunch of old industrial stuff that I inherited from my uncle. I did have a lot more of it a few years back, but the room has adapted as time has gone on. So I've got like an old railway lantern, and for a while I had old like car badges and things like that, and a bunch of old tools and tins and things like that. But it's ever changing. I always like go out to the shed and see if there's something cool that I can find, and keep things new and interesting. But yes, maybe one day you'll see it, but at the moment it's a bit crowded. Liam asks, can you play any musical instrument? And now that's a good question. I used to be able to play the piano and the clarinet as my main instruments that I learned as a kid. But slowly over time, I haven't touched those instruments for a very long time. But I have been teaching myself the guitar lately. And I'm not that great at it yet, and I did have a bit of a setback as well, and I'm going to explain that to you. So I was getting pretty good at the guitar. A lot of it is with finger strength in your left hand if you're right-handed, and right hand if you're left-handed. And that basically goes on the fretboard to make the notes and chords that you need to play the songs. And so I was getting pretty good at that, and I love finger picking, so picking out the individual notes, and it can get quite complex. Now, a few months back, I was in the garden, because that's also another hobby of mine, and I was using our wood chipper to make compost. If you break all the leaves and twigs down into smaller bits, they'll break down a lot faster, and I will have fresh mulch and compost for the garden within a month or two, as opposed to a whole year. And so me being me, a bit lazy, and I was a bit tired at the time, the wood chipper had clogged at the exit chute, and so I decided to stick my hand in there to unclog it, and I did not realize the blades were that low. And you may have figured out by now, but I broke all 4 of the fingers in my left hand, and I cut them up pretty badly too, and so that landed me a hospital stay for a number of days, and pretty intensive surgery. But thankfully I've been able to recover to a point where these fingers are fine. But my ring finger, unfortunately, was damaged quite a bit, and so that doesn't fully close quite yet. And of course, all the strength in these fingers was completely lost, and I had to build it up again. And so I was once fairly good at the guitar, but now, at least for now, a lot of my notes are sounding a bit flat, and sometimes my hand's a bit slow getting to the right strings. But I'm building that strength back up, and the doctors have said I've made a miraculous recovery considering the damage that was caused to my hand. And they said I am lucky to have fingers, so word of wisdom, don't operate a wood chipper when you're tired, and don't try and take shortcuts with heavy machinery. I'm a bit out of practice, but let's see how this goes. That was Green Green Rocky Road by Dave Van Ronk. And unfortunately, one of those chords, I completely missed it with the ring finger. Duncan asks, who are your celebrity crushes? So as a kid, say like just at the start of puberty, my friend and I had long discussions about this, and we were pretty fond of Emma Watson. And I feel like that's a bit of a easy answer to give. So I don't follow many celebrities, and I've had to think quite a bit about this. But I would also have to say Cara Delevingne, currently, and there's one person who isn't technically a celebrity, but they are a well-known musician amongst a bunch of people I know, and they're gaining popularity. And they're a hippie band called the Babe Rainbow, and they make very 60s style music, like very trippy stuff. I really like listening to it. And there's a guy who is like quite tall, and he's got long blonde hair and this like long bleach blonde beard. And so appearance-wise, and also he's got a very kind nature. And so I guess you could call him a celebrity crush as well. But their music is very great. I would suggest you check it out. Louise asks, if you are comfortable, it would be cool to hear more about your partner and the whole thing with the promise ring and your sexual orientation in general. But if that's too personal, I understand. Other than that, what is your favourite cuisine, and where have you travelled? So, that's a very interesting question. And I think one that a lot of people have been wondering about as well. So thank you for asking that. So yes, when I first started my YouTube channel, I used to wear a promise ring. And I've actually got it right here. And it was a matching promise ring that I wore with my boyfriend. And when we first got them, we were 16, possibly like early 17, and we wore them up until late last year. And so basically, yes, we'd heard about the tradition of having promise rings as like kind of a pre-engagement. Like we were too young for an engagement, but we felt like we connected with each other. And so we decided to get these matching rings. Now, they're just like plain, I think it's titanium, or possibly even just steel. And it's got this little black band down the middle, and a tiny little stone just here. Now, as to why we stopped wearing them, it was mainly just questions from a lot of family and friends who didn't quite understand it, and we were just having the same conversations over and over again. And also they would get in the way of things quite a bit, and so we decided not to wear them anymore, but to keep them close to us. And also, unfortunately, now it no longer fits on my ring finger because the knuckle is damaged. It's more about my partner. We've been together for 3 years now. We did have a brief time apart about a year ago now, around September time, but we sorted out all the problems that we were having, and it's overall been a very healthy relationship. So we met at the same school, and at first were pretty close friends. But then this progressed on after many months to us going to a music festival together, and eventually drinking a bit of alcohol, and we kind of lost our filter, and our true feelings came out over that music festival. And I'm definitely not condoning alcohol or drug use, but that is how it began. It kind of broke down the wall of awkwardness and all these like pent-up feelings, and everything was out in the open. My partner, Ed, currently studies film at university and digital media, and hopes to one day become a director and maybe work in the political field, which is also an interest of his. So, addressing my sexuality, around grade 10, I started to really realize that there may be another side to me. And I was I became quite bi-curious. In the years before, I had felt little things, but not wanting that for myself. I was completely fine. I was a strong supporter of gay rights and gay marriage, and I didn't have a problem with that. But the thought of myself maybe not being straight, and what was considered the norm in middle school, was terrifying to me, and so I repressed that quite a bit. And I just didn't even entertain the thought until grade 10. I began the friendship with my partner Ed, and also a person named Juliet. And these two people really kind of woke me up to what life could be like if I was just true with myself and explored this side. And so I knew that I liked girls. I always knew that I liked girls, and I always will. But I began to explore a side of me that I really hadn't previously given any thought to. And that's when I began to realize that I think I am bisexual. And so yeah, that's basically it. And I often thought maybe it would be easier if I had just never allowed myself to open up to this side of me. But in the long term, I think it has been a good choice to be honest with myself and explore these feelings, because I've had some good times, I've met some great people, and of course I have had this long-term relationship with my partner, which hopefully one day will turn into a marriage, or at least a long-term living arrangement, but who knows where life will lead us. As for the second part of Louise's question, a few other people have asked the same questions, and so I will include them in this video. Jake asks, how long have you and your partner been in a relationship? And yes, as I said before, it has been 3 years now, which is quite a long time when I think about it. I remember when we first got together, the first few months, it felt like we'd been together a long time, but now 3 years down the line, we know everything about each other's families, all the dramas, all the intricacies. We've basically met all the distant family members, and it's quite comfortable now. Nick asks, which sense do you feel is most important, and which could you live without? This took a lot of thinking, and I reckon I couldn't live without my sight. I'm terrified of one day losing my sight, and I always make sure I'm wearing safety goggles whenever I'm using powered gardening equipment, and I always make sure that I am very careful with my eyes. Because I love my garden, I love looking out at other people's gardens and nature, and I feel like just having the memory of that, I'm not sure, it would just perhaps even torture me? I don't know, because it is a sense that I rely on so much, because I love reading, I love watching videos, and I love looking at beautiful landscapes, and creating beautiful landscapes as well in the garden. And so when it comes to losing sight, I think that would have a very big impact on me. And a sense that I would trade in perhaps would be touch. And it's also a very difficult thing to trade in, but I love hearing music, I love smelling flowers and good perfume. But I think touch, I would miss the sense, I definitely would, but I don't think I would miss it as much as I would miss some other senses. Because yeah, like taste, smell, hearing, and of course eyesight, I feel mean a lot more to me than touch does. John asks, favourite movies? That's actually a really good question, and I think a few people are going to laugh at this, but I'm going to have to say Brokeback Mountain. And I think it is mainly due to the first time I saw this film. So it was back in grade 10 when I was starting to question this other side of myself that I'd never really given any attention to. And I decided, it was late at night, I think it was 3 a.m, and I was up and watching Netflix, and I decided to click in the LGBTQI film section that they have, and I found Brokeback Mountain. And me being a lover of the outdoors, I saw the thumbnail that they had, and I read a little bit about the story, and I thought, this could be a good film. And I'd never heard of it before, so I went into it with a completely untainted view of what it was going to be. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the scenery and the story that it told, and especially the times that they were living in back then. I just really liked it. My second favourite film is Dallas Buyers Club, and that, I just loved the soundtrack in that, and I also loved the story that it told of kind of a rough around the edges person being shunned from their own community and bonding with and forming a bond with people who he never would have connected with otherwise, and they bonded over the HIV virus. King Cayenne Williams asks, what are your favourite recipes to make, and why do you like it? So, my favourite recipe would have to be, I do this pasta thing. It's a bit like a carbonara, but it isn't. It's like this creamy cream and cheese and pepper, and it's got a bunch of vegetables in it, I think. That's always a really good one. I like making that. But I think my all-time favourite would just have to be homemade stir-fry, and especially from homegrown vegetables, because you can just throw in a whole bunch of vegetables and meat if you want, fry it in some sesame oil, and then add a bunch of sauces. You could throw in some noodles if you want, or just cook up some rice. And it's just a really quick and easy thing to do. It tastes great. You can include a bunch of vegetables from the garden, or just clean out your fridge. You can pretty much throw anything into a stir fry, and it's going to be good. A wok is definitely something I'm always going to have in my house with me. Wherever life takes me, I'm always going to have a wok. Ginger asks, what is the most fascinating thing about studying archaeology? This or ancient history seem like very interesting major choices. So yes, if you didn't know, I study archaeology at university. I think the historical side of archaeology interests me the most, so the more recent happenings, like the early days of Australia, the indigenous archaeology fascinates me, and that goes way back. But also the archaeology of the early settlers, definitely the historical side of archaeology, but also the early indigenous Australian archaeology really interests me as well. And I think when it gets down to the basics, it's just studying stuff that people who came before you left, and piecing together a story of what their life was like, how they managed to survive, and how we've kind of evolved into the people that we are today, like how we got here. And so I think that's the part that really interests me the most about this topic. Lataro also asks a very similar thing, and I'm sorry if I got that name wrong. Hey, as you said, you study archaeology. I'd like to ask you which ancient cultures and civilizations attract you the most, and if you're interested in inquiring about how these cultures understood the sound and even explored the nature of sound. And so yeah, this is also a very good question. I think sound has been a very integral part of ritual as long as humans have been around. There's definitely strong evidence in the recent cultures that we've been able to actually meet and study through word of mouth that they've passed down through the generations. the rituals that are still upheld today, and we can also see the musical instruments that were used in ritual back in civilizations that have been long forgotten. And so, I'm not sure. Definitely, I know that the Australian Indigenous culture has a very strong focus on sound. I'm not sure of any culture in particular that interests me the most, especially in terms of sound, because using sound in ritual is quite a broadly practiced thing. But, yeah. That's the best way I can explain it, I think. Harry says, "Hey do you speak any other languages, or are there any you would really love to learn?" Okay, well, in primary school, otherwise known as elementary school, we learned Italian, and then we moved on to learning French. And I continued French into high school, and also learned a semester of Japanese, which I was never able to pick up. But French is definitely the one that I liked the most, and definitely the one that I remember the most of. But I really can't go very far past saying, like, "Hello, my name's Wildwater. Bonjour, je m'appelle Wildwater." That's basically it. I can kind of refresh the memories and speak a bit more, but I'm not really ready to go to France yet. Another person asks, "Do you have any plans for the new year?" And no, I do not. I think I'm going to be studying in university more. But apart from that, really nothing has been planned out. I hope to perhaps either get a job, or if my channel takes off, maybe take YouTube more seriously. But I really don't have anything planned out as of yet. Mainly just focus on my mental health, focus on having a good time, and perhaps starting to make my way out into the workforce and get some savings down. Mr. Eurofan Spain asks, "Do you like travelling? Which place would you rather visit soon?" I do like travelling, but the problem is, at the moment, my anxiety is kind of at an all-time high. And so when I go out, even if it's just into the city or something, I always take Valium with me because I'm very prone to panic attacks. And that's kind of put me off travelling at the moment. But I do like going interstate. I do like going on road trips. As far as overseas, I haven't really given that much thought. But I've always been intrigued by the landscape in New Zealand. So I know that's not very far. But it is definitely, well, pretty much the first time I would have gone overseas if I went to New Zealand. I do have a trip in the next year or two that might be happening to New Zealand, as my partner's family is from there, but I really don't know. I like hiking a lot, and there are a lot of hiking trails that I hope to explore, and a lot that I explored in my childhood in Scouts that I'd like to return to. Hiking and camping, but again, the anxiety has kind of been putting me off, but I do hope to overcome that this year, or at least get it to a stage where it's manageable, and really venture out into the world a lot more and kind of force myself out there, to have a lot of good experiences while I'm young. I think the positives will far outweigh the negatives when it comes to that. Jeremy asks, "Where is the place you would most like to travel that you haven't yet been to?" So yes, I really haven't travelled out of Australia at all. And in terms of travelling within Australia, I also haven't done much of that either. But again, New Zealand is a place that I'd really like to go, as well as Tasmania, perhaps, which is part of Australia, but it is offshore, because my dad has spoken great words about the hiking trails in Tasmania and all the time that he spent climbing the mountains there and having a lot of fun in his younger years. G-Dog is also curious about my sexual orientation, and yes, I am bisexual. I swing both ways. Alex, a long-term subscriber and frequent commenter and replier to my tweets, asks, would you rather grow hair on your tongue or tongues on your hair? What a question. Wow. After a bit of thought, I think I would rather grow hair on my tongue as opposed to tongues in my hair. And I think that's because I would get self-conscious if I had tongues in my hair. I feel like people would look at me, even if they didn't mean to upset me. I think they would stare a lot because it is something that you don't really see. And so if I had hair on my tongue, although it would be uncomfortable and a very weird sensation, I think I'd be able to get used to that. And as long as I don't stick my tongue out, I think only the closest people to me would notice. That's my take on it. Harry asks, what non-ASMR channels do you watch? In terms of my YouTube watching habits, I kind of get obsessed with certain things for a few months and then switch over to another thing and then go back to another. Like I've had phases where I'm obsessed with photography videos and others where I'm obsessed with cycling videos and others where I'm just really obsessed with gardening videos and things like that. And although I maintain these hobbies and upkeep these hobbies, it's just I have these really intense periods of watching these videos and like getting really into them. So in terms of channels, there's a good gardening one. His name is Charles Dowding. He's an Englishman, and he's very fond of the no-dig gardening method. And I really like his videos because he's really informative, he's very real and down-to-earth, and he just gives all of these really great tips that you would otherwise just kind of pick up from friends and pick up from experience, but he's just kind of giving them to you in this very casual YouTube vlog style setting. Global Cycling Network is a big cycling one that I like to watch. They're very popular and they make very professional content, but mainly I just watch rubbish, really. I watch YouTube poop videos, and if you don't know what they are, it's a very odd name, but it's basically videos that have been just completely taken out of context and mixed up into the craziest things. Like you've got a children's poet talking about crazy stuff that he's done, and a lot of it is very adult humour as well. Well, I guess you could describe it as childish adult humour. Like it's middle school humour. It's it's very like there are a lot of jokes made about genitalia and sexual acts and things like that. It's completely absurd. But I just love how ridiculous it is and how some of these video makers, they spend hours on this stuff. I've made one of my own. It was a Bob Ross video that I desecrated with 4 hours of editing work, and out of it came just a video, a minute-long video of content. So these people really pour hours of their life into this stuff, and I just love how fast the delivery of it is and how disorienting it is and how crazy it is. And it's just insane. Like, it feels like you're losing your mind when you're watching this stuff. So I definitely watch a lot of those videos. A great YouTube poop channel is called Jed Honor. The last time I checked, they hadn't uploaded in months and months and months, but they had some of the best and most amazing content that I had seen to date. a very talented person, and I've spent a lot of time watching those videos over and over again, and even though I know the jokes that are coming, they still manage to make me laugh. Especially when I'm sleep deprived or a little bit buzzed. It's just so misleading and crazy that it's hilarious. Adenine, I think I've pronounced that name very incorrectly, so I apologise for that, asks, what's your age? And I am currently 19 years of age. I have been 19 for half a year now, and here I've made previous references to drinking and doing things like that, but here in Australia, or at least in my part of Australia, the legal drinking age is 18. But yes, it has been a very interesting time. I still don't feel like I am an adult, even though legally I'm considered as one. And I still feel weird whenever I'm going to try and get into a nightclub or a bar or things like that, and I still feel kind of skittish when I'm ordering a drink at a bar, because I always feel like they're looking at me a bit sideways and thinking like, oh, are you old enough? Because I don't feel old enough yet. They also ask, what is the best thing about life? When I'm having panic attacks every day, which also send me into big depressive episodes, and it's dark to talk about, but it's being honest, it sometimes feels like things are pretty bad. And I just think back to the times when this didn't happen. Back to when I could just duck down to the shop for something quickly and I'd be fine and I wouldn't have to try and fight off a panic attack the whole time. But I've found that it's very important to find pleasure in the small things in life that you enjoy. Whether that be your friends. For me, being very introverted, I find being alone in my garden and kind of working with it and creating what I see in my head, and the dreams that I have for what it should be, and then creating them. I find that a very healing thing, and I definitely find that very important in life. I enjoy that a lot. I also enjoy my partner. I find him very important in my life. Also, the best thing is, another best thing in my life would be the feeling of riding my bike along country roads or flying along in my car. I've got this little 2-seater convertible Mazda, and I love it to bits, and I love just flying through the country roads and the hills, and it's great in the corners. It's not a very high-powered car, but it's very lightweight, and it's known as one of the best at going around corners. It's got this 6-speed manual gearbox that I love. And I think just the feeling of being out on the bike or being in the car, and I guess just the feeling of that freedom and the carelessness that brings, I think that is the best thing in my life right now. Just chasing that feeling, and I savour it when it happens. So that brings us to the conclusion of this very long, possibly boring Q&A video, but I hope I've answered a lot of your questions. If I didn't get around to answering your question, or if you didn't realise I was doing this Q&A, just send me a tweet or send me a message on Instagram, and I will do my best to get back to you with my response. I'm sorry if any of this was a bit deeper than you were expecting, but I feel like honesty is key, and talking about these things should be more normalised, so people feel less guilty about it and they can find like-minded people and know that they're not alone. So, thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.